I used to think I had everything under control. Life was good. Hell, was damn near perfect. I had a beautiful wife, two amazing kids, and a house that looked like something out of a magazine spread. Claire and I had been married for 8 years, and she wasn't just my wife, she was my anchor. She held it all together. No matter how crazy things got, she was the one constant I could rely on. Breakfast on the table every morning, kids always dressed and ready, and she never missed a beat when it came to supporting my career. Most nights after work, I'd just sit back and watch her cook. There was something soothing about the way she moved around the kitchen, hair spilling over her shoulders as she stirred a pot or chopped veggies. The kids would be running around, filling the house with laughter, and I'd think, yeah, this is it. This is what life's all about. And for a while, it felt like nothing could ever mess that up. But lately, Claire had started pulling away. At first, it was small things, a look that lingered a second too long, an absence of warmth in her smile. I told myself it was nothing. People get tired. Life gets stressful. I mean, raising 2 kids and keeping everything running smoothly isn't exactly easy. I chalked it up to one of those phases every couple goes through. But that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Then one night, everything changed. I was in the middle of dealing with some work emails when my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, expecting some spam message or a pointless notification. But instead, there it was, a text from an unknown number. Your wife is cheating on you. Investigate this if you don't want to lose everything. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, frozen. My heart felt like it had stopped, and my palms were slick with sweat. Claire? Cheating? No way. I mean, this was Claire, the woman I built my whole life around. But the words on the screen burned into my brain, and suddenly, every little distant look, every early bedtime, every moment she seemed preoccupied started flashing through my mind. Things I'd brushed off before didn't seem so harmless anymore. I tried to shake it off, but that message lodged itself in my head like a splinter. I told myself it was probably some sick joke. Maybe someone wanted to mess with me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I opened browser tabs, tried to dive back into work, but it was useless. All I could think about was Claire. By morning, I knew I couldn't leave it alone. I needed answers. I waited until she was out of the room, hoping to get a quick look at her phone, but it was locked. Always locked. I wasn't about to ask her for the password. That would raise too many questions I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I tried to piece things together from what I could find online. Her social media looked normal. Family photos, posts about the kids, the same old stuff. Nothing stood out. Frustrated, I went to our kids. I know it's messed up, but I was desperate. I casually asked if Mommy had been acting weird lately. My youngest giggled and said, "No, Daddy. Mommy's the same." That should have been comforting, but it just made me feel worse. They were too innocent to know anything, and here I was dragging them into my paranoia. I started poking around with Claire's friends, too, trying to be subtle at first. I ran into her friend Lauren at the grocery store and asked if she and Claire had been hanging out much lately. Lauren gave me this weird look, like she knew something but didn't want to say it. "Yeah, we catch up now and then," she said with a shrug, but it didn't sit right with me. Either she knew something she wasn't telling me, or I was starting to lose my mind. Meanwhile, things at home were getting tense. Claire noticed I was acting off, and it wasn't long before she confronted me about it. "Nathan, what's going on with you?" she asked one night while we were brushing our teeth. "Nothing," I mumbled, avoiding her eyes. But she wasn't buying it. I could see the worry creeping in, and that only made things worse. Each passing day felt like I was balancing on a razor's edge. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy time with the kids, and every time I looked at Claire, I felt like I was watching someone I didn't know. The woman who used to be my rock now felt like a stranger. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe the message was a prank. Maybe Claire was just tired or stressed, like I'd originally thought. But the doubts kept gnawing at me, and I couldn't push them down no matter how hard I tried. Looking back, that text was the moment everything started falling apart. It cracked open something I didn't even know was fragile. And from there, it only got worse. And the worst part? A part of me still wanted to believe it wasn't true. I still wanted to believe that everything was fine, that Claire wasn't hiding anything. But deep down, I knew. Once those cracks appear, you can't just tape them over and pretend they were never there. That message had flipped my entire world upside down, and I was standing on the edge, waiting to see how far I'd fall. And trust me, the fall was just beginning. At work, things weren't much better. I'd sit at my desk, staring at emails and spreadsheets, but my mind kept looping back to that damn text. My concentration was shot. I'd catch myself checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for, I don't even know what, maybe a second message, something to tell me it was all a prank. But nothing came. Then came Grace. She was new, young, full of energy, and with this smile that could probably convince anyone that life wasn't as complicated as it felt. She wasn't just a secretary. She was the kind of person who made an effort, you know? Whenever I walked into the office, she'd greet me with that bright smile and ask how my morning was, what I had planned for the day. Harmless stuff, but somehow it made a difference. I felt like someone cared about me, even if it was just in a small way. I try to keep things professional. I was a married man. Despite everything, that still meant something to me. But Grace had a way of pulling me in. She had this knack for knowing when I was down, and instead of ignoring it like most people, she'd ask, "You okay, Nathan?" in this soft voice, like she really wanted to know. It was subtle, but those little moments made me feel seen. One day, after a particularly bad night at home, I found myself standing in her office doorway, shoulders heavy with the weight of everything I'd been holding in. I wasn't even sure how it happened, but the words just spilled out. I told her about the message, about the way Claire had been acting distant, about the doubts eating away at me. I even admitted that I'd checked Claire's phone and talked to her friends, but I was still coming up with nothing. It felt good to say it out loud, like a pressure valve had finally been released. Grace didn't judge me. She just listened, nodding in the right places, her eyes steady on mine. When I finished, she leaned in a little and said, "No one understands a woman like another woman." There was this quiet confidence in her voice that made me feel like I wasn't crazy for thinking something was off. "Let me help you," she offered, tilting her head slightly. "We'll figure this out together." And just like that, I felt a little lighter. Maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe I was just desperate for someone to be on my side. Either way, I agreed. I didn't even stop to think about whether it was a good idea or not. I just wanted to know the truth, no matter what it was. Over the next few days, we came up with a plan. Grace had this way of making it sound easy, like following your wife to catch her cheating was no different than figuring out where to grab lunch. She taught me tricks, how to follow someone without being noticed, how to spot patterns in behavior, stuff I'd never even considered. It felt strange, sneaking around like some kind of amateur detective, but it also gave me a weird sense of control. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just sitting around drowning in doubts. I was doing something. We spent evenings watching Claire from a distance, following her when she went out. I'd park a few cars back, heart pounding in my chest as Grace pointed out little details. How Claire's body language changed when she thought she wasn't being watched, how she smiled a little brighter when she was with certain people. Grace made it feel like we were on the verge of cracking a case. But every time I thought we were getting close, Claire would do something totally normal, and my suspicions would waver. One night, we followed her to a little cafe where she met up with an old friend. They were laughing and chatting, looking like two people without a care in the world. There was nothing suspicious about it, just two people having coffee. I sat there in the car, watching them through the window, and felt this wave of guilt wash over me. What if I was wrong? What if Claire wasn't cheating at all? "You see anything off?" I asked Grace, trying to keep my voice steady. She shook her head. "Not really," but something in her tone made me uneasy, like she wasn't entirely convinced either. Or maybe I was just projecting. I didn't know what to think anymore. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over in my head. Was I chasing shadows? Or was Claire really hiding something from me? I hated the not knowing. It was worse than the thought of her actually cheating. At least if I had proof, I could confront her and deal with it. But this was torture. And yet, a part of me couldn't stop. I was too far in now. If Claire was cheating, I had to know. And if she wasn't, well, I guess I had to know that too. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand, half hoping for another message. But the screen stayed dark and silent. I sighed and closed my eyes, knowing that tomorrow we'd be back at it again. Following, watching, waiting. The message came late at night, just as I was starting to wonder if all of this had been a colossal mistake. My phone buzzed, and there it was, Grace's name on the screen. "I think I've got something," her message read, followed by a photo. I opened it, and my stomach twisted into a knot. In the picture, there was a woman with Claire's exact build. Same hair, same style, kissing a man I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding in my chest. It wasn't a clear shot. They were partially hidden behind a doorway. The lighting was off, and I couldn't see her face perfectly. But it looked enough like Claire to make my head spin. Grace texted again. "It's her, Nathan. I'm sure of it." I stared at the photo for what felt like forever. I told myself it could be fake, that it might just be someone who looked like Claire. But deep down, I didn't care. I want to know, I needed to believe it. After weeks of doubts, paranoia, and sleepless nights, this was something solid. It gave me a target for my anger, a reason for all the distance and the coldness I'd felt from Claire. "This is her, Nathan." Grace's voice echoed through my thoughts, like she was sitting right next to me, feeding the fire that was already raging inside. And just like that, I gave in. I didn't even try to question it anymore. I was done second-guessing myself. If that wasn't Claire, then it was someone close enough to make no difference. Grace texted again. "Come over. Let's talk this through." I hesitated for a second. I knew this was a bad idea, that going to her place was crossing a line I wasn't sure I'd be able to uncross. But I was already so far down the rabbit hole. The thought of sitting alone in that house with nothing but my own thoughts gnawing at me was unbearable. So I texted her back, "On my way." When I got to Grace's place, she greeted me at the door with a warm smile. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a little bit of relief. She invited me in, and the smell of something cooking drifted from the kitchen. "Hope you like pasta," she said with a playful grin, pouring 2 glasses of wine. We ate, we drank, and the conversation flowed easily. Too easily, maybe. Every sip of wine loosened the tension in my chest, and before I knew it, I was telling Grace everything. How scared I was of losing my family, how betrayed I felt, and how helpless I'd been feeling. "You deserve better," she whispered, her hand brushing lightly against mine. There was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in Claire's for a long time. The more we talked, the more the air between us seemed to shift, like the room was getting smaller, closing in on just the 2 of us. I knew what was happening, but I didn't stop it. Maybe I didn't want to stop it. There was a strange comfort in the way Grace looked at me, like I was something she wanted, something valuable. It was the exact opposite of how I'd felt at home. When our eyes met, it was like gravity took over. Before I knew it, we were kissing, soft at first, then harder, like we were both trying to escape the weight of our own lives. One kiss turned into another, and then we were stumbling toward the couch, hands fumbling, wine glasses forgotten on the table. I don't even know how long it lasted. Time seemed to blur. All I knew was that for the first time in weeks, the noise in my head finally quieted. But the moment it was over, reality came crashing back. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the weight of what I'd just done pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. Grace was asleep next to me, her breathing soft and steady, but I couldn't close my eyes. All I could think about was Claire. Guilt washed over me like cold water. What the hell had I done? I loved Claire, didn't I? Even after everything, even after all the doubts and anger, she was still the woman I'd built my life with. And now I'd gone and done the one thing I never thought I was capable of. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Grace, and sat on the edge of the couch with my head in my hands. My phone was on the coffee table, and for a brief, insane moment, I considered calling Claire. I wanted to tell her everything, to confess, to beg for forgiveness. But what was the point? I had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The only thing left to do was figure out how to live with it. The next morning, the first thing I saw was Grace's phone lying on the coffee table, her screen still lit up from a notification. I rubbed my eyes, thinking nothing of it at first, until I noticed the message. My heart stopped. It was the same anonymous text, the exact same one I got weeks ago. "Your wife is cheating on you. Investigate this if you don't want to lose everything." The blood in my veins turned to ice. I stared at the message, my mind racing. I picked up the phone, scrolling through her messages. Sure enough, there were more. Messages back and forth about Claire, about me. Grace had planned this from the start. She was behind it all. You orchestrated this to get close to me. I yelled, my voice cracking with rage. Grace stirred awake, sitting up with a sleepy, confused expression. What? I held up her phone, the screen still glowing with the damning evidence. This was you. That message. You sent it. You've been playing me this whole time. Her eyes widened, and she reached for her phone, but I snatched it away. Nathan, wait. It's not what you think, she pleaded, her voice soft, trying to calm me down. Not what I think. I scoffed, my heart hammering in my chest. You've been feeding me lies, making me think Claire was cheating just to get me in your bed. I could barely believe the words coming out of my own mouth, but they were the only ones that made sense in the moment. Grace sat up straighter, panic flickering across her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far. No. I cut her off, the weight of betrayal crashing down on me. You used me. You made me doubt everything, Claire, my family, my entire life. My voice broke, and I hated myself for how pathetic I sounded. I didn't mean to hurt you, Grace whispered, but it was too late. The damage was done. That's bullshit, I snapped. My hands were shaking, fists clenched as I tried to hold myself together. You knew exactly what you were doing. She stood up, wrapping the blanket around herself. Nathan, please, let's just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I shouted. You ruined everything. Then her expression changed. Her sadness hardened into something darker. If you don't want this to get worse, you'll keep your mouth shut. My stomach dropped. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She folded her arms, the blanket slipping slightly off her shoulder. If you don't play nice, I'll tell Claire everything. Every single thing. I stared at her, disbelief swirling with rage and panic. She had me, and she knew it. One word from her to Claire, and my marriage would be over. I could already see it. Claire's face crumpling in disbelief, the kids looking at me like I was a stranger. Everything I had worked for, everything I had tried to protect, gone in an instant. You wouldn't, I whispered, but the words didn't carry the weight I hoped they would. Grace just raised an eyebrow, as if daring me to try her. I took a step back, running a hand through my hair, trying to figure a way out of this mess. I only had one option. You're fired, I said quietly, almost choking on the words. Her eyes widened in shock. What? You're done, I said, more firmly this time. I'll make sure you get your severance pay, but you're not coming back to the office. Grace's face twisted with anger, but I didn't care. I had to cut her out of my life, whatever the cost. You'll regret this, she hissed, but I was already walking toward the door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I needed to get out of there before I did something I'd regret even more. The next day, I went into the office and told HR to process her termination. They asked if I wanted to provide a reason, but I just shook my head. Personal conflict, I mumbled. It was the best I could come up with. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life play out in front of me. I thought firing Grace would make me feel better, like it would give me some sense of control over this nightmare. But it didn't. If anything, it made things worse. Claire didn't know anything yet. She still went about her day like everything was normal, laughing with the kids, planning our weekends, unaware of the mess I had made. I watched her closely, looking for any signs that she suspected something. But there was nothing. She was still the same Claire, still trying to hold our family together. And me? I was a wreck. The guilt gnawed at me, clawing at the edges of my sanity. Every time Claire smiled at me, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of what I had done. I had betrayed her, and she didn't even know it. I tried to focus on my work, on the kids, on anything that would distract me from the knot of regret tightening in my chest. But it was no use. I was trapped in a mess I had created, and there was no clean way out. Each night, I lay in bed beside Claire, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep the truth buried. Every laugh we shared, every small moment of closeness, felt like a lie. And no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew deep down that things would never be the same again. Grace was gone, but the damage was already done. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And now, all I could do was wait for the fallout. A month passed, and I was doing everything I could to push Grace from my mind. I focused on Claire, on the kids, on trying to rebuild some semblance of normal. It wasn't easy, though. Every time I saw Claire smile, a knot of guilt twisted in my chest, reminding me of what I'd done. But I kept telling myself that I'd dodged a bullet. Grace was gone, and no one knew. If I could just keep things together, maybe, just maybe, I'd get through this. Then one evening, just as we were wrapping up dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, Grace, standing on my porch like a ghost from my worst nightmare. Her hair was tied back, and she had that same bright smile on her face, but this time, it felt colder. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and deliberate. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me so Claire wouldn't hear. "What the hell are you doing here?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Grace's smile faltered for a second, and then she dropped the bomb. "I'm pregnant, Nathan. It's yours." I felt the ground shift beneath me. My mind went blank for a moment, like I'd been hit with a 2x4. "What?" "You heard me," she said, crossing her arms like she'd just won a game of poker. "I missed my period. Took a test. It's positive." "No," I muttered, shaking my head. This can't be true." Grace's expression didn't change. "It is. We need to figure out what we're going to do." Before I could respond, the door swung open behind me, and Claire stepped out. "What's going on?" she asked, eyeing us suspiciously. Grace didn't even hesitate. "I'm pregnant," she said flatly. "And it's Nathan's." Claire's face crumpled, her jaw dropping as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Then came the screaming. "You bastard!" she shrieked, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. You cheated on me? After everything?" "Claire, wait." I tried to explain, but it was useless. "No," she snapped, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to me? To us? I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." "It wasn't like that," I pleaded, panic setting in. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought." "You thought?" Claire spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You thought it was okay to screw your secretary and blow up our family? I didn't know. I don't care what you knew." She cut me off, her voice raw and filled with betrayal. "You betrayed me, Nathan. You betrayed us." The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. There was no way out of this. No explanation, no excuse that could fix what I'd broken. Claire turned on her heel and stormed inside, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, stunned, as Grace shifted awkwardly next to me. "I'll be in touch," she said quietly, before walking away and leaving me standing there alone. Inside the house, Claire was still screaming, crying and throwing things, her words a chaotic storm of pain and anger. I followed her to the kitchen, trying desperately to make her listen. "Claire, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake." She whirled around, her face streaked with tears, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "A mistake? You call this a mistake? You destroyed everything." I tried to hold it together, but the cracks were too deep. "I love you," I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew the words sounded hollow. "Don't you dare say that to me," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this." There was nothing left to say. Claire stormed past me, gathering things into a bag. "I'm leaving," she announced, her voice cold and final. "Wait, what about the kids?" I stammered, panic gripping my chest. "They're staying with you," she snapped, not even looking at me. "I can't do this. I can't be here." And just like that, she was gone. The front door slammed shut behind her, and the house fell silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of my heart. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind spinning, my heart shattered into pieces. Claire was gone. Grace had blown my life apart. And now, I was alone with the wreckage I had created. The kids came downstairs, confused by the noise. "Where's Mommy?" my youngest asked, clutching his blanket. "She had to go, sweetheart," I whispered, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "But everything's going to be okay. I promise." They looked at me with wide, trusting eyes, and I felt like the biggest fraud in the world. I had failed them. I had failed everyone. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a vice. I tried to tell myself that this was just another rough patch, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew better. Claire was gone. Grace was still out there, her presence lingering like a shadow over my life. And no matter how hard I tried, there was no going back to the way things were. This was my new reality, and it was all my fault. In the weeks after Claire left, everything came crashing down. The news of what happened spread faster than I could contain it. Friends I'd known for years, people I thought would have my back, turned away from me without hesitation. I heard it all. Whispers about how I had destroyed my marriage, ruined my kids' lives, and thrown away everything for a fling with my secretary. Every time I tried to explain, to tell my side of the story, it was met with the same response. A shake of the head, a pitying glance, or worse, a judgmental sneer. "I thought you were better than that," one old friend said. "Guess we didn't really know you." Even Claire's family, who I'd spent years building a relationship with, turned cold. Her brother called me one day just to say, "You had everything, and you threw it away. What the hell is wrong with you?" I hung up without responding. What was the point? The weight of it all became unbearable. Everywhere I went, I felt the eyes on me, the whispers just loud enough for me to catch. The city I had built my life in, the place I called home, suddenly felt hostile and suffocating. I couldn't stay. I needed to leave, start fresh somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I wouldn't be haunted by my mistakes. It took a couple of months, but I found a job in a smaller town a few hours away. It wasn't anything glamorous, but it was enough. I packed up what I could, loaded the kids into the car, and left everything else behind. Driving away from that house, knowing Claire wasn't coming with us, felt like ripping off a piece of my soul. But I kept my eyes on the road. Starting over wasn't easy. The new town was quiet, almost too quiet, and the first few weeks were rough. I kept waiting for the guilt to crush me, for the weight of everything to pull me under. But slowly, things began to shift. The kids adjusted quicker than I expected. They made new friends, and seeing them laugh again gave me hope. I found myself meeting new people too. Neighbors, co-workers, people who didn't know my story, who didn't look at me with pity or judgment. It felt strange at first, almost like I didn't deserve the kindness they showed. But I let it in anyway. I even picked up a few new hobbies, things I hadn't made time for in years. I started going for runs, joined a local soccer league, and found myself getting lost in books again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't drowning in guilt or anger. I was just living. Then out of nowhere, I got the call about the DNA test. I almost didn't answer when the number popped up on my screen, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the other end told me what I had been dreading to hear. Grace's child wasn't mine. I hung up, sitting there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. The relief hit me first like a heavy weight lifting off my chest. But right behind it came the regret. It didn't matter that the baby wasn't mine. The damage was already done. Claire was gone, and I had lost more than just my marriage. I sat with that feeling for a long time, replaying everything in my mind, what I could have done differently, the signs I ignored, the choices I made in the heat of the moment. But there was no changing it. The past was carved in stone. In the end, I realized something important. I could spend the rest of my life drowning in regret, or I could move forward. I still had my kids. I still had a chance to build something new, even if it wasn't the life I had planned. So, I made a decision. I stopped looking back. I started focusing on what was in front of me. I reached out to new people, found joy in small things, and began building a life that made sense for who I was now. Not the man I used to be, but the man I was becoming. It wasn't easy. Hell, it's still not easy. But every day I get a little stronger. Every morning, I wake up with a little more hope. I'm learning to forgive myself, to accept that mistakes are part of being human. And most importantly, I'm learning to live again. I'll always carry the weight of what happened with Claire. Some scars don't fade. But life goes on, and I owe it to myself and my kids to make the most of what's left. This isn't the story I wanted for my life, but it's the one I have. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. It's been about a year since everything fell apart, and honestly, life feels different. Not perfect, but better. I won't lie. There are still nights when I lie awake, thinking about Claire and the way things used to be. I wonder if I could have done things differently, if maybe I could have saved us. But those thoughts don't hit as hard anymore. They come, and I let them pass. That's all I can do. The kids have adjusted to the new town. They're doing well in school, made some good friends, and they seem happy. I'm proud of them. I try to be the best father I can, even if some days I feel like I have no clue what I'm doing. Work keeps me busy, and I've started carving out time for myself. I run every morning now. It clears my head. I joined a local soccer league, met some great people, and for the first time in a long while, I've stopped feeling like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I haven't heard from Claire since the divorce was finalized. She moved on, at least it's what I heard from mutual friends, and I've made peace with that. There's no going back, and I've accepted that. The Grace situation? Turns out it really wasn't my kid. I got the confirmation months ago, and honestly, the relief I felt was overwhelming. But it didn't change the fact that what happened between us destroyed a part of me. That's something I'll have to live with, and I've learned to be okay with that too. I've started seeing someone. Not anything serious yet, but it's nice. Her name's Emily. She's kind, patient, and understands that I'm still figuring things out. I'm not rushing into anything, but it feels good to be with someone who sees me for who I am, not who I was. Life is quieter now, simpler. I miss the version of it I once had, but I'm learning that starting over isn't the worst thing in the world. I've let go of the anger and guilt, and in their place, I've found something unexpected: peace. It's not flashy or dramatic, but it's real. And for now, that's enough.